Hello everyone, today we're going to learn about oral communication and we are going to focus on reading aloud. And this is part of the English language videos and this is part 2 of what we're going to learn today. So for lesson 2, we're going to focus on how to speak well. And the objectives is to differentiate the qualities of effective and ineffective speech delivery. Explain what makes speech delivery effective or not. And let's go. So let's recap what we have learned for the previous lesson on the aspects of vocal delivery. And I think it's important at this point to pause and draw a mind map of the concepts you have learned. You can draw it on a piece of paper that is convenient for you or an exercise book that you have set aside for the subject. So your mind map should include all the aspects of vocal delivery and PAC, namely purpose, audience, and context. Next, connecting the lines to show the relationship between these aspects. I'm going to pause over here. Please go and draw your mind map and then we'll move on. You can pause here right now. Okay, let's go. Next page. So, what does the mind map look like? So, does your mind map actually look something related to mine? So, in the middle, we have vocal delivery. And as there are a few concepts that are related to vocal delivery is the awareness or PAC, which I have explained earlier, purpose, audience, and context. And followed by the other three, which is on fluency, tone, and pronunciation. Under fluency, you have pace, rhythm, and speed. In this case, they can be separated out, not necessarily joined in this case to fluency, it doesn't go that way, but they can be joined separately to fluency. So tone, you have stress, pitch, and volume. Same rules apply, you can actually join them all straight to tone. And you have pronunciation from articulation, consonants, and vowels. They all form under articulation and pronunciation. If your mind map seems incomplete, here will be a very good time to pause and complete your mind map. And once you're ready, we shall proceed to the next component. So, today we're going to introduce this idea of chunking. What does chunking basically means? It is the process of breaking down a text into smaller parts so that it's easier for you to read aloud. It means that you pause at certain points to take a breath, and after that, refocus your energy on the next section so that you can create some form of flow. Let's take a look. So, how to read expressively, you actually need to focus on 4 aspects. So, punctuation marks like commas, full stop, missed semicolons, and colons usually mark the end of a chunk or a certain section, and that's where you pause and take a deep breath. You can also end a chunk even if there's no punctuation mark, and we'll be covering this in a while. And each chunk will have a slight pause at the end, maybe half a second if you want to be precise, half to about 1 second will be sufficient. And last but not least, we have each chunk will have a stress and emphasize word. And this part will be incredible if you can pause at the right moment, and it creates the effect that you know what you're speaking about. So when you are actually pausing, it actually adjusts your pace, your tone, your stress, according to the different chunks you have identified when you're practicing. So several examples follow, we will be showing you in a while. So let's take a look. This is chunking sample number 1 by this lady. Do you think that this is a good reading and why?
Today I'd like to talk to you about a concept called chunking. Chunking is a strategy that great speakers use very effectively. It sounds effortless, but in fact it takes a lot of practice.
Okay, so what do you think of her reading? Do you think that is a very good reading? Well, some of you might say yes, some of you might hesitate to call that good reading. Let's take a look. The speaker did not break the text into chunks, so it's a non-stop flow. So in this case, there's few pauses and there's very poor rhythm. The tone is kind of monotonous and the fluency is interrupted by mistakes when articulating the words. This is something that you should try to avoid. And let's take a look at the next example. Chunking sample number 2. And is this a good reading and why?
About a concept called chunking. Chunking is a strategy that great speakers use very effectively. It sounds effortless, but in fact, it takes a lot of practice.
I apologize here because the mouth doesn't really match the reading, but if you listen carefully to what the person says, it takes a while to process what she has said because there is so many chunks. So the idea here is that she actually broke down into too many chunks, and this causes a problem because it creates this form of stuttering rhythm, and it doesn't resemble natural speech, the natural fluency of speech, because there are too many pauses. And the tone is slightly better, but it does not sound appropriate because when we talk about purpose, audience, and context, it doesn't really match up. So let's take a look at the next example.
Called chunking. Chunking is a strategy that great speakers use very effectively. It sounds effortless, but in fact, it takes a lot of practice.
So, do you think this is a good reading, and why? Well, let's take a look at her reading for sample number 3. The speaker actually broke the text into reasonable and meaningful chunks, and this allows you to understand what she's speaking about, even though, yes, you're reading the same text as her, but you may not be able to speak the same way as her if you do not break down into reasonable and meaningful chunks. So, pauses are actually appropriate to guide the listener on the idea expressed. Tone is varied and quite bright, means that it actually doesn't sound monotonous, and is appropriate to the context of teaching the listener something new, and that is something worth taking note of. Reasonable and meaningful chunks, and to guide the reader, and you need to vary and make sure that your tone is bright. Let's take a look at the next one. So, when we say how chunking works and seeing the chunks itself, you can see that there's a slash there. There's a slash between today and I'd like to talk to you about a concept. So the slash actually helps you to break up the chunks, and you can see that there's a slash between concepts and called chunking. Even though I cannot see any punctuation there between the concept and chunking, there is this idea that you have to break that into meaningful section. So punctuation may not be that necessary to break them up, but you have to look at the meaning, because meaningful, right? Full of meaning. So when we look at the meaning itself, the idea concept is an idea, chunking is an idea. So we break in between them to separate the idea.
I'd like to talk to you about a concept called chunking. Chunking is a strategy that great speakers use very effectively. It sounds effortless, but in fact, it takes a lot of practice.
Okay, I would advise you to pause here and try reading this with the chunks itself being separated. This will be a really good practice to get into the mood of chunking. And once you're ready, let's move on. So, the slash actually shows the end of each chunk, and the chunks usually follow punctuation mark. I said usually because between concept and chunking there's no punctuation, which means you got to understand the meaning and decide whether it is necessary to pause there to define the end of the chunk. Okay, so like I said, even the phrase may be long and the sentence may be very long, and there is actually a need to pause to make sure that your meaning is conveyed and you can emphasize on what you really try to convey. Okay, now that we have break the parts into different chunks, that is step number 1. Step 2 is to stress on one certain concept. And if you don't know which concept it is the most important concept in terms of meaning wise. So how chunking works, using chunks to vary the stress. So stress is you increase the volume, perhaps you slow down your speech, perhaps, and there are a number of ways to do that. Let's take a look.
Chunking. Chunking is a strategy that great speakers use very effectively. It sounds effortless, but in fact, it takes a lot of practice.
Okay, so I would advise you to pause here and try chunking again with the emphasis and the break, which is defined by the slash. Okay, once you have tried out this paragraph, I think that I'd like to explain this part, which is that when you are doing chunking, especially when you're given a text, you can place the slash first, and next define the most important keyword. And when we talk about the keyword, you break the word up, you think out of key and word. Key basically means it's important. So you find the most important word that you feel is important when you're talking to someone and use that and emphasize on that. So do not overstress a word, otherwise you'll be unnatural. And do not over enunciate each consonant, because that will also make your reading sound unnatural as well. Let's take a look at the next part, which using chunking words where you use the chunks to vary the pace.
To be aware of your pace on those stressed words. So on those stressed words, you're going to stall a little bit more. You're going to hold onto that vowel in the stressed words a little bit longer. So it creates, when you stress a word, it does create a different pace. You're slowing down on that word. Okay, that's how we stress it. So listen to my pace and how I kind of speed up and slow down throughout this paragraph. Today, I'd like to talk to you about a concept called chunking. Chunking is a strategy that great speakers use very effectively. It sounds effortless, but in fact, it takes a lot of practice.
Okay, so she advised that you can drag the word or slow down the word. I believe that it is a very wise strategy. So what you can do is that you can slow down your words. You can perhaps slightly increase your volume to draw the attention that you need. And that is a number of ways you can actually play stress. And when you slow down, it actually vary the pace. So slow down on the stress word, resume a normal pace on unstressed words, which are those that are not in bold, and never rush through a passage. So when you're reading the unstressed words, it is important to read at your normal pace, but at the important words, which are the key words and the stressed words, you slow down, or maybe slow down and slightly increase the volume. Articulate your consonants and vowels clearly, which means that if you're reading at a very fast pace, you're not able to clearly articulate them. So it is important that you will need to consider the pace as well. So read at a way that you can express yourself without having the need to rush through. And this is important because you might go towards the other side of too fast when you're nervous, or you might go towards the side when you are very conscious of yourself and you start to read things very slowly, which is monotonous. So please avoid that. So you might need some time to figure out where is your natural pace, like how you speak to a friend. Time to be an examiner. So we'll listen to these tracks and you're supposed to grade them using the rubrics that you are given earlier. This is important because you need to be able to justify the choice. So there are 3 tracks here. So as you listen to them, take note compared to the passage and you will be able to decide the grade. Okay? So we'll decide where is the band, then later where is the mark. Okay, let's play first.
Good afternoon, Sylvia.
Good afternoon.
Sylvia, we will begin with part 1, reading aloud. Please start reading the passage.
I just spent the day surrounded by some of the friendliest, bravest and most adventurous people I've ever met. And amazingly, every one of them was over 70 years old. I was at an activity day organised every year for the elderly residents in Kingston Estate. Over 200 participants enjoyed a huge variety of activities, from arm wrestling to line dancing. There were competitions for both team and individual. There were extreme sport demonstrations and lots of opportunities to try out something new. This afternoon, I watched an exciting hockey match where last year champions were narrowly defeated by a last-minute goal. I cheered with the crowd at a hilarious tug of war match which finished with both sides collapsing on the ground laughing. And later I stood at the climbing wall where 73-year-old Sarah Chan received a great round of applause as she reached the top. When she was safely back on the ground, I asked Sarah what had motivated her to try out this activity. This is what she told me. I've been coming to this event for the last 12 years, and every year I like to try something different. Organizers here are very wonderful. They're very safety conscious, and there's never any real danger, but it's such a thrill at my age to know that I can still take on some new challenges. Next year I'm definitely going to try the paintballing course. I wish her good luck and move on to see another interesting and challenging activities. Despite the hard-fought competition, the atmosphere for the whole day was one of fun and friendship. Everyone was encouraged and applauded whether they succeeded or not. Today was all about taking part. These elderly people are a real inspiration.
Thank you very much, Sylvia.
And thank you, Sylvia. So at this point, I would like you to give your band and your mark before I review mine. So let's take a look at the marks that I would give and what kind of band would it fall under. The band is actually band 3 and the marks is 3 out of 10, and that's a failure. So there's actually slurred reading, lack of clarity of articulation and pronunciation. There's incorrect words if you look at a passage. They actually change word or word form, such as adding a S sound to the word elderly when there shouldn't be a S. And you have words that is stuttered or hesitation going on, so there's a lack of fluency and the tone did not reflect the role. It's very monotonous, so there's little awareness of purpose, audience and context. That will deserve a 3 mark out of 10. So let's take a look at track number 2, Celine.
Good morning, Celine.
Good morning.
Celine, we will begin with part 1, reading aloud. Would you please read the passage?
I've just spent the day surrounded by some of the friendliest, bravest, and most adventurous people I've ever met, and amazingly, every one of them that was over 70 years old. I was at an activity a day, organized every year for the elderly residents in Kingston Estate. Over 200 participants enjoyed a huge variety of activities, from arm wrestling to line dancing. There were competitions for both teams and individuals. There were extreme sports demonstrations and lots of opportunities to try out something new. This afternoon, I watched an exciting hockey match where last year's competitions were narrowly defeated by a last-minute goal. I cheered with a crowd at a hilarious tug-of-war match, which finished with both sides collapsing on the ground laughing. And later, I stood at the climbing wall where 73-year-old Sarah Chan received a great round of applause as she reached the top. When she was safely back on the ground, I asked Sarah what had motivated her to try out this activity. This was what she told me. I've been coming to this event for the last 12 years, and every year I like to try something different. The organizers here are wonderful. They are very safety cautious and there's never any real danger. But it's such a thrill at my age to know that I can still take some new challenges. Next year, I'm definitely going to try the paintballing course. I wished her good luck and move on to see another interesting and challenging activity. Despite the hard-fought competitions, the atmosphere for the whole day was one of fun and friendship. Everyone was encouraged and applauded, whether they succeeded or not. Today was all about taking part. These elderly people are a real inspiration.
Thank you, Celine.
And thank you, Celine. And as you can hear, there has been a slight improvement. So right now, I would advise you to pause here and give your band and your mark. And once you are ready, please press resume. So for this case, the band will be given band 2 and she'll be receiving 6 marks. And why? So the comments given is that generally she has clear pronunciation and articulation. There are some incorrect reading of words and odd pauses, especially near the start. It's affected the fluency of the reading, and she already attempted to vary her tone. There are some awareness of purpose, audience, context of her speech, and that will place her at 6 marks. Let's take a look at track number 3. Janice.
Good afternoon, Janice.
Good afternoon.
Janice, would you like to start reading the passage? This is part 1, reading aloud. Please begin.
I've just spent the day surrounded by some of the friendliest, bravest, and most adventurous people I've ever met. And amazingly, every one of them was over 70 years old. I was in an activity day organized every year for the elderly residents in Kingston Estate. Over 200 participants enjoyed a huge variety of activities, from arm wrestling to line dancing. There were competitions for both teams and individuals. There were extreme sports demonstrations and lots of opportunities to try out something new. This afternoon, I watched an exciting hockey match where last year's champions were narrowly defeated by a last-minute goal. I cheered with the crowd at a hilarious tug-of-war match which finished with both sides collapsing on the ground laughing. And later, I stood at the climbing wall where 73-year-old Sarah Chan received a great round of applause as she reached the top. When she was safely back on the ground, I asked Sarah what had motivated her to try out this activity. This is what she told me. I've been coming to this event for the last 12 years, and every year I like to try something different. The organizers here are wonderful. They're very safety conscious and there's never any real danger. But it's such a thrill at my age to know that I can still take on some new challenges. Next year, I'm definitely going to try the paintballing course. I wished her good luck and moved on to see another interesting and challenging activity. Despite the hard-fought competitions, the atmosphere for the whole day was one of fun and friendship. Everyone was encouraged and applauded whether they succeeded or not. Today was all about taking part. These elderly people are a real inspiration.
Thank you, Janice.
Okay, let's take a look at what Janice has performed so far, but I will advise you to take a time now. Please give her a band and a mark. Okay, once you're ready, let's move on. So she would be placed at band 1 and she'll be given 10 marks. That's a full mark, by the way. Comments: there's very clear articulation and accurate pronunciation, fluent reading, and effective pauses and stress. Animated tone reflect full awareness of the speaker's purpose, audience, and context. Now, one area to improve, perhaps her pace for some of the keywords could be altered, such as exciting. So in this case, we're not looking for perfection, but near perfect is always welcome. After comparing your grades with the exam grades, what are your reflection? I think this would be a good time to reflect on this question and think about how it can actually help you in your own reading. And once you're ready, we shall continue. So, how to speak well? It is very possible to be a fluent and clear speaker. So when reading aloud, use chunking to help you break down the passage into meaningful pieces. You locate which chunk ends at which you can take a breath. And this is very important. When you don't breathe, you can't read. Simple as that. Next, you need to think about the purpose, audience, and context. This is usually given in the italics words at the top, so you need to process the information. Perhaps you are a counselor, or maybe you are a president. You may be a class chairperson. So at which point you need to consider how you wish to speak, who is the audience. Maybe you are speaking to your classmates, maybe you are speaking to the principal with the teachers and the students, or maybe you are speaking to volunteers. So different kind of context is important for your consideration. So you read confidently and naturally at audible volume. This is important, especially when you are usually quiet. This could be a challenge. So there is actually a need for you to practice, and especially in situations where you are wearing a mask, this will be harder. But that will not deter you from scoring. So please take note of that, and given the role that you are taking on. How to speak well? Articulate your vowels and consonant sounds clearly so that everyone can hear you. Next, practice pronouncing all words, even difficult ones. This is especially important during the practice session, and do not skip this section. Your effort will be credited. You might actually have to slow down your pronunciation, so please take note. And control your pacing, that's using your stress, and pause effectively so that people can understand you. And that is the key. And vary your intonation to fit the purpose, audience, and context. So for next lesson, we actually need you to find a partner. Please get into pairs. And if you are ready, thank you for listening to this. And I hope that you have a very good day. Thank you, and stay tuned for the next lesson. Goodbye.